Hey guys, tonight we're rolling back the quilt of history to experience one of the least hygienic, most panic-riddled eras anyone's ever pretended to sleep through, the time of the Black Death. Not the fun, goth Halloween kind. The real kind, with boils, superstition, and absolutely no soap. Not even the fake artisanal kind your ex's new boyfriend sells. Before you settle in, please like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this, because I know you have options, like watching paint dry, which, honestly, might smell better than medieval Europe. Drop a comment telling me your plague survival plan, or just how many days you lasted before you started blaming the neighbor's cat for your problems. Now, dim those lights, switch on your fan so you can pretend it's the sound of howling wind through a thatched roof, and get comfortable. Even if your mattress is lumpy, it's still 100 times fluffier than literally anything in 1347. Let's get you wondering, how did anyone cope with no understanding of germs? Did people really think bathing made you sicker? What did you eat when everything smelled like an expired soup kitchen? Could a single garlic necklace keep disaster at bay? Or was that just another way to keep your social life on permanent lockdown? Would you survive a day without your phone? Or would the urge to tweet about your pestilent symptoms break you first? And just how many frogs in a jar does it take to feel safe from invisible death? Congratulations! You've just woken up in 1347. The year everything gets extra crispy, and not in a good way. You're in a world where work never stops, everyone itches somewhere, and you're about to appreciate hand sanitizer on a spiritual level. Let's get medieval. You blink awake on a scratchy pile of straw, your entire body protesting like it's been used as a chew toy for horses. The air smells like barnyard and regret. The first sound you hear? Someone across the alley coughing up their deepest anxieties. Welcome to morning, where your main job is simply not dying. There's no snooze button here. Only the jarring reality that every joint and muscle in your body feels like it's been sandpapered by a particularly vengeful medieval poltergeist. Your clothes, assuming you own more than one rag, stick to your skin in all the wrong places, courtesy of last night's cold sweat. The medieval mattress beneath you is nothing but fills of straw infested with things that are definitely not in any modern bedding catalogue. A rat scurries across your makeshift pillow with the blasé entitlement of a seasoned city landlord. You try to rise, but your back cracks like a bundle of dry twigs. This is as luxurious as mornings get for 99% of people living in the Middle Ages. You're not royalty, nor a monk sworn to silence and soft cheese. You're just ordinary. And this means you share your home with more species of vermin than friends. Congestion isn't just in your nose. It's the state of every street, every alley, every communal latrine. Hygiene is a concept reserved for holy relics and distant, wishful thinking. You look around for water to splash on your face. The communal bucket, half covered with a waxy film and buzzing with disinterested flies, stares back. This is the same water everyone else has already used for everything. Washing, yes, but also perhaps a bout of plague-ridden spitting, laundry, emergency sheep dousing, and the odd accident from the neighbor's toddler. Remember, germs are not yet a thing. Spoiler, you are definitely not safe. Out in the winding streets, it's barely dawn, but life is already bustling at a feverish, desperate pace. Vendors hawk their wares, onions, dubious bread, yesterday's fish, now with more flies than scales. Men and women drag themselves toward work that begins before the sun and ends long after it sets. If you're lucky, your job sees you outside, a thatcher, a street caller, or a farmer trudging through muck. If unlucky, and most are, you may be sealed inside a steamy, plague-scented workshop, forever inhaling the aromatic mixture of sweat, tallow, and animal fat. You notice that everyone is tired. Everyone is some degree of unwell. It's almost comforting. How misery here is the great equalizer. Even the local lord occasionally limps by, wincing at a gouty foot and pretending not to notice the neighbor's pig in his front yard. Breakfast, if it exists, is crusts of bread harder than philosophy. Maybe a smear of questionable lard, and, if fortune favors you, a sip of ale. This cacophony of coughing, roosters, and municipal despair, is the medieval morning. Your main task, survive the next hour, and then the one after that. Each new sunrise is less a gift and more a grim reminder that pestilence, starvation, or a misdirected chamber pot could take you out before supper. But there's also an undeniable resilience here. You get up anyway, scratch at your bites, stretch your battered limbs, and join the parade of humanity trudging onward. So congratulations. You're not dreaming. This is living in pestilence. All you have to do now is make it to lunch. Time for breakfast. Sure, you're hungry, but your options include dark rye bread so old it could be carbon dated, and something in a wooden bowl that might once have been peas. It tastes suspiciously like medieval sadness with a hint of barn. Breakfast in a medieval village isn't the feast you might be dreaming of. There's no sweet scent of bacon wafting through the air, no eggs sizzling merrily over a crackling fire. Instead, the villagers greet the day with a collection of foodstuffs that have somehow survived both time and taste testing. The centerpiece. That infamous stale bread. It's tough, it's chewy, and it doubles as an effective substitute for a shield in a pinch. There's a reason nobody ever wrote love poems to breakfast bread. Next up is the mystery mash. It's greenish, it's lumpy, and the exact identity of its ingredients is anyone's guess. Crushed peas? Moldy beans? Pulverized hopes and dreams left out overnight? Whatever it is, it's the village's morning ritual. Each spoonful offers a surprise, sometimes a pebble for extra texture, perhaps even a stray bit of straw as a reminder that hygiene is a modern luxury. Eating it means bracing yourself for culinary roulette, where every swallow brings a new flavor or challenge. You try soaking the bread in weak, lukewarm ale, a common local trick to soften things up. Forget orange juice or coffee. Here, watery ale is your breakfast beverage of champions. It's less about enjoyment and more about survival. The alcohol content is almost negligible, but it's enough to mask the questionable taste of whatever the bread has picked up in the night. If you're lucky, someone might have hoarded a chunk of cheese, though its color and scent suggest that cheese is a relative term largely dependent on what you're willing to believe is edible. For the children, breakfast isn't much better. Instead of cereal or fruit, they might get a porridge so thin you can see right to the bottom of the bowl. Bits of last night's turnip stew float by, carried along in a river of bland resignation. Once in a while, a lucky child discovers a berry. This is a cause for celebration, until someone else snatches it away in a brutal display of playground Darwinism. Mealtimes are communal, and everyone huddles together sharing what little they have. There are no private breakfasts, no personalized orders. If you want jam, honey, or even salt, you're out of luck unless you live alarmingly close to a beehive or a salt mine. Spices? Forget about it. Black pepper is worth more than your boots, and a pinch of cinnamon is the stuff of wild tavern tales. Conversation at the table is limited. The less time spent contemplating the food, the better. Villagers mostly focus on the day ahead, endless labor in the fields, hauling water, or hoping the sun will shine long enough to dry out their clothing, but not their bread, which threatens to cross over into fossil territory any day now. Breakfast is fuel, not pleasure. For visitors from the future, adjusting to this ritual is a real shock. Gone are notions of avocado toast and pre-dawn lattes. Here, breakfast tests your jaw strength, your bravery, and your willingness to suspend disbelief. It's a game of bingo where winning means nothing chipped your tooth. And so, each morning begins with the same stubborn perseverance. You eat, you grimace, you fantasize about pancakes. There's a resolute camaraderie in communal suffering, a quiet agreement that if everyone pretends the food is tolerable, perhaps it somehow becomes so. If not, there's always tomorrow's serving of mystery mash to look forward to, or dread. Breakfast in the medieval village, never delicious, rarely fresh, always unforgettable. What are you wearing, you ask? It's not a romper. It's not even pants, if we're being precise. Your daily outfit is a single tunic, expertly grimy and accessorized with last week's stains. Let's be honest, a medieval wardrobe wouldn't make it past the first inspection on any modern red carpet, but that's entirely the point. In an era when most people owned one, maybe two changes of clothing, and probably only because grandma died and left behind her good shirt, your look was less about high style and more about strategic layering, stain camouflage, and not freezing to death. Laundry day? Ha! That's for the clergy and their fancy river privileges. For everyone else, your best bet was to scrape off the worst of the grime and hope yesterday's odors would eventually overpower today's. However, Don't be fooled into thinking there wasn't any fashion at all. Social class was stitched into your seams. Are you a serf? Congratulations. Your clothes are made from coarsely woven wool or linen, itchy, durable, and dyed in the most exciting shade of potato brown science can muster. The nobility, meanwhile, draped themselves in finer fabrics, imported silks, brighter colors, aggressively advertising that they had neither tilled soil nor scrubbed dishes. If you were lucky enough to own a blue or purple tunic, people might whisper you have an uncle in the clergy, or worse, the tax collector's favor. As for the status markers of footwear, the everyday villager's choice was simple: harden the soles of your feet or cobble together some leather wraps if you could spare the hide. Shoes represented not only class, but also how far you could expect to walk in a week, or how long your toes might survive winter. But back to the tunic. It was the true workhorse of the peasant closet, suitable for all occasions. Farming, feasting, funerals, and, yes, fighting off the odd bandit or wolf. The standard process for freshening up your tunic was to beat it against rocks in the local stream a couple of times each year, or to let it hang in the wind until nature decided the smell was less offensive. Underwear, as modern folks know it, was either an afterthought or, for many, a rumor. While some men had simple drawers or brays, most simply made do with whatever they could layer closest to the skin. Your outfit said a lot about your job, your network, and sometimes your luck. Farmers and laborious gravitated towards short, sturdy garments, long enough to cover, short enough not to trip in mud up to your ankles. Women wore similarly practical tunics, but longer, layered with aprons and head coverings that did double duty as sun and lice shields. In the rare event you needed to dress up, options included pinning on a brooch, if you hadn't pawned it yet, borrowing that one nice cloak your household pooled resources to buy, or strategically brushing away visible hay and animal hair. Laces and toggles functioned less as style statements and more like medieval duct tape, holding together torn seams until you could beg a needle from a neighbor. One of the most curious phenomena: wardrobe sharing. Clothes were expensive, so families often swapped pieces depending on who needed to look presentable. By medieval standards, let's be clear. This meant your youngest sibling was probably fashioning your father's old undershirt into next year's overcoat, and hand-me-downs came with bonus authentic, embedded stories, a mysterious wine stain, or a patch sewn in with thread from last year's plague banner. Despite the never-ending cycle of grime and patchwork repair, there was pride in making do. A tunic well mended was a sign of resourcefulness. A colorfully patched sleeve? Actually, a badge of honor for surviving another season. And if nothing else, you could always trust that what you lacked in sheer volume of clothes, you more than made up for with a pungent, unshakable medieval authenticity, a look and a scent that could never be mistaken for anything but real. You step outside and greet the morning mist, which mostly consists of smoke from everyone burning things they hope are magical herbs. Breathing deep, you realize hope is not an effective air filter. Despite the charming term morning fog, your nose knows better. The acrid blend wafting through town is more like wishful thinking seasoned with charred laundry. At one end of the path, old Mary's is fanning a smouldering pile with both hands, insisting that the more you cough, the stronger the spell. Never mind that her spell is just keeping the local mice population highly motivated to stay outdoors. As you tiptoe past, don't be surprised if you catch a whiff of something familiar. That's because half the villagers, in a burst of optimism, have tossed day-old soup bones and questionable vegetables on their ritual fires. It's a communal effort, part smokescreen, part accidental potluck, that ensures nobody asks why every meal tastes vaguely of beetroot and despair. Now, venturing beyond your hovel's sagging doorframe, you notice how quickly the mystical atmosphere drops away. The fog thins, revealing uneven cobblestones and abandoned buckets, as if the world itself is exhaling in relief. Results remain inconclusive, but the neighborhood cats remain deeply invested. You'll want to keep your wits about you out here. Sidewalks are slippery, naturally, when they're slicked with condensation, mud, and the magical equivalent of grandfather's homemade cough syrup. It's a minor miracle that anyone gets anywhere without performing an impromptu slapstick routine. Small children, ever resourceful, simply skate through the muck, launching themselves downhill on makeshift sleds until someone with a broom, usually their grandmother, reroutes them back to safety, or at least, to where she can see their faces. And then there's the Village Air Quality Committee, two retired wizards with clipboards and monocles held together by sheer stubbornness. They claim to monitor particle density, though their primary function is public scolding. Gets you measured in the same way a spice merchant sizes up a suspicious coin. No, they don't actually know what's in the fog. No, you don't want to be on their bad side. As the sun climbs higher, its pale beams slice through remaining tendrils of smoky air, illuminating surprised toes, lost spoons, and the ongoing tug-of-war between local goats and unattended laundry. There is, beneath all the commotion, a stubborn optimism. Today, someone might finally manage a spell effective enough to clear the haze, or at least disguise the scent of cabbage. Until then, you do as everyone else does: squint, shuffle, and hope your breakfast survives the trek through ambient soup vapor. So, welcome to the outside world, a place of equal parts promise and particulate. You haven't left the mysteries of the hovel behind. Here, they just float in the open air, occasionally disguised as street theater or accidental culinary fusion. Step carefully, breathe shallowly, and remember, whatever is swirling around you is probably, hopefully, just fog, but bring a handkerchief, just in case. If you've ever wondered what the inside of a compost pile smells like after a heat wave, congratulations, you're living it. Fresh air in 1347 is a carnival of questionable aromas, from animal traffic to untreated drains right outside your door. But step outside, if you dare, and you'll realize the fun has just begun. Let's paint the olfactory picture. Every narrow alley is its own unique corridor of stench. Remember, waste disposal is a concept for future centuries. In medieval cities, chamber pots are emptied out of windows, making the morning stroll a test of agility, luck, and dry heaving. Isn't just a polite warning, it's survival advice. The pungent notes of human waste are intricately blended with rotting food thrown into the streets, because composting is just tossing apple cores and chicken bones out the door and hoping no one notices, or cares. On market days, the aromas get even more complex. Picture open-air stalls heaped with fish, meat, and various mysterious animal parts, all left out in the sun without even a nod toward refrigeration. The fishmongers' stalls are especially notorious. Unsold stock doesn't go back into the fridge, it just slowly becomes more characterful as the day wears on. And who could forget the overwhelming perfume of livestock herded through town, leaving behind organic souvenirs at every turn? Inside your own home, things don't improve much. A roaring hearth sounds picturesque until you realize it's belching outward smoke, coal fumes, and whatever you're burning to keep warm. The smell seeps into the walls, your clothes, your hair, everything. Mixed with the damp, moldy aroma of thatch above and packed earth below, home sweet home is more of a hopeful mantra than a truthful description. Personal hygiene routines of the time deserve an honorable mention in the chorus of aromas. Bathing is rare, at least for most people. Water is precious and often risky to drink, never mind soak in. Instead, the average medieval person cleverly masks their scent with herbs, flowers, and, for the wealthy, rare perfumes. But most folk just ride out the body odor storm. The result? A population with a robust, omnipresent musk, punctuated by an occasional whiff of rosemary or lavender, if you're lucky. Then there's the tanner's quarter, where animal hides are transformed into leather using methods that would clear out a modern subway car in seconds. Stacks of skins are soaked in vats filled with fermented urine and dog dung, an olfactory experience strong enough to make your eyes sting from 50 paces. Tanners are sometimes relegated to the city edges, but the wind laughs at boundaries, carrying their labors across the rooftops and straight through your window. All this said, it's important to remember that everyone in 1347 is more or less living in the same bouquet of odors. Citizens of the medieval world are experts at distinguishing the good, the bad, and the hazardous by scent alone. Stale air could mean sickness, or a dead rat under the floorboards. A sudden sweet note might be the neighbor brewing ale, or simply covering up something more sinister. If you're lucky enough to escape to the countryside, things get marginally better. Sure, you'll be swapping more urban effluvia for the eye-watering essence of manure-spread fields and livestock pens, but at least you can take in a lungful without worrying about airborne surprises from an upper-story window. So if your modern sensibilities are struggling, remember, everyday life in 1347 is not just visual and audible, but a profoundly aromatic adventure. Your nose never gets a break. From waste in the streets to the subtle undertones of mold and smoke indoors, the smells of medieval Europe are everywhere, defining the texture of a world where clean is still just a theoretical future. Soap? Exotic and practically illegal. Baths? Only if you want your neighbors to talk. Water is suspicious, and the fewer times it touches your skin, the better, at least, according to the finest medieval science. To medieval Europeans, the act of washing wasn't just unnecessary, it might actually kill you. Medical treatises of the era linked baths to everything from the plague to sudden fainting spells. Doctors advised that hot water opened the pores, letting in all manner of invisible villains, miasmas, noxious vapors, and, of course, demons. Instead of washing, they suggested dry cleaning, with a linen cloth. In other words, give yourself a brisk rub and hope for the best. But if you're imagining peasants caked in mud and royalty wading through filth, well, you're half right. Urban water sources were often suspect, filled with more extras than most soups. Streams doubled as laundromats, trash disposal, and every so often, as the scene of a dramatic medieval breakup, pots and old bread included. With water itself regarded as a possible health hazard, people showed a near-religious devotion to remaining dry. To compensate, medieval Europeans deployed an arsenal of scented remedies. Rosemary and lavender weren't just for seasoning. Instead, bundles were tucked into clothing or sewn into pomanders, turning every noble into a walking spice rack. When it came to social survival, pleasant scents were your shield against suspicion, while anything less threatened to out you as either sick or, worse, sinful. The upper classes, with their access to fancy imported perfumes, could sometimes get away with a little more. If you must occasionally wash, let it be during the carnival, when all kinds of wild behavior was conveniently excused, or if a royal decree demanded public displays of cleanliness. Even then, the procedure was elaborate, and public baths, common in earlier centuries, slowly disappeared, their association with disease and moral decline proving too much for even the most desperate bathers. Ironically, the actual science of bathing was still developing. Medical experts clung to ancient Greek ideas about the body's humors and believed that water, especially fresh, moving water, was potentially destabilizing. As for personal experience, if you became sick after your one-yearly bath, surely it was the bath to blame. Anecdotal evidence reigned supreme. What about the monasteries, you ask? Weren't monks famously clean? Indeed, in some orders, regular washing was encouraged as part of the spiritual regimen. Monastic bathhouses and elaborate systems of fresh water existed in many large monasteries, proving that not everyone in medieval society relished grime. But the general public couldn't always access such luxuries, and monks were sometimes viewed with quiet suspicion for their radical cleaning habits. Not all was bleak, of course. Body linens, shirts, shifts, and underclothes were the medieval deodorant, absorbing sweat and, crucially, replaced and washed far more often than the bodies they clothed. A fresh nightshirt could signal your wealth as much as your modesty. A well-laundered noble might boast that he used a dozen clean shirts in a week, while poorer folks relied on a shabbier but equally crucial layer. By the later Middle Ages, suspicions of bathing peaked. Public bathhouses, too closely associated with vice for many city authorities, were shuttered or heavily regulated. Periodic outbreaks of plague and other diseases gave new ammunition to anti-bath sentiments. Medical warnings became law, and for a time, medieval Europe practically legislated itself into stink. So, why risk bathing when you could instead embrace the protective powers of dirt, layers of linen, and a handful of rosemary? In this world, a bath was not an act of self-care, but a brush with mortality. Medieval cleanliness was complicated, laced as much with fear as with filth, and dictated by the ever-present shadow of health experts who wanted nothing more than to save you from the perils of water. In other words, if someone in your medieval village accused you of smelling a little ripe, you could simply remind them, it's for your health. You shuffle through the village square, where merchants hawk onions as a cure-all, and pigeons are equal parts food and indoor pet. Every cough comes with a side of suspicious glances. Bustling with the rhythm of early trade, the market is an aromatic onslaught. Sharp garlic, fresh-cut leeks, the earthy tang of root vegetables straight from the soil. Hawkers promise miraculous health for a penny. Buy my radishes. The sellers are as animated as their vegetables. You pass a stall where a woman, face half-shadowed by her linen cap, insists that her onions, when hung by the door, protect against all evils, plague very much included. Around you, people clutch these vegetables like holy relics. Some, less convinced, buy them only for soup. Amidst the shouting, the pigeons strut, some plump and proud, others looking askance at the passing feet, all highly coveted for their meat and eggs. Pigeon coops are scattered behind booths, and now and then, a feathered fugitive attempts to break free, prompting children to the chase and laughter to punctuate the market's hum. Yet, for those who can't afford the prized fowl, bread crusts dipped in onion broth suffice. There's more than produce on offer. Apothecaries' tables, draped in faded velvet, bear poses, pungent herbs, and mysterious vials. No one asks what's in it. Instead, coins change hands rapidly, and buyers tuck vials into their ragged pockets. You note that her most frequent customers are the village's older women, shawls pulled tight, eyes darting at the barest cough. Coughs, indeed, stand out as much as cabbages in these times. A small, hunched boy behind a basket of apples succumbs to a fit, and a wide berth opens immediately. Familiar signs of fear that the plague, or something as dire, lingers close. You watch as his mother presses a clove-studded orange into his hand, an expensive purchase, meant to purify the air as he breathes. The distancing is as transactional as any produce sale, not personal, but matter-of-fact. After all, the market survives on wary routine. Still, daily life must press on. Wives argue animatedly over turnips, haggling as if it were any other year. Bakers, with hands dusted in flour, wave crusty loaves under the eager noses of children whose faces are half hidden behind makeshift masks, scraps of cloth perfumed with mint or vinegar. Some laugh off the danger. Others watch the streets, eyes tracking anything amiss. Despite these anxieties, there is camaraderie in the chaos. When a cart overturns, cabbages rolling everywhere, merchants and customers alike swoop in, hands quick and businesslike, righting the mess. A man jokes about the cabbages running from the plague. Laughter, nervous but genuine, ripples through the crowd. It's in moments like these, you realize, that the village keeps the shadows at bay. By midday, the market's pulse slows. Bundles of onions dangle from stalls, symbolic talismans as much as tomorrow's dinner. Pigeons retreat to shade, and the scent of crushed herbs lingers in the heat. The village square, for all its bustle, is as much a tableau of ritual as commerce. Each exchange, each half-worried glance, a testament to a community trying to ward off both hunger and the invisible threat that defines these days.
You stab your toe.
The local healer prescribes a variety of life-affirming treatments, leeches, garlic necklaces, and possibly shouting at the moon. Nobody understands germs, but everyone is an expert on frog jars. If you're lucky, you're only recommended smoking with herbs or a poultice made of bread and pigeon droppings. But don't get too comfortable. The healer might follow up with a stern lecture about how your stubbed toe is punishment for angering the local river spirit. So maybe try a humble offering of bread and butter down by the water's edge just to hedge your bets. After all, when science is confused with sorcery, you need both ointments and omens. Imagine that something truly goes awry. Say, you experience a vague pain in your abdomen. The diagnosis? Miasma. Of course. This ominous-sounding word just means bad air, a catch-all explanation for pretty much every illness short of decapitation. Treatments vary by region, but universally involve foul smells, unpleasant tastes, and a dazzling selection of bodily fluids. Sometimes, elaborate masks stuffed with spices are involved. For the doctor, not you. Sorry. You still get the leeches. If, by some cosmic misfortune, your ailment is deemed serious, you might be invited to the town's most respected man of science, whose main credential is owning the largest collection of suspiciously stained aprons. His first order of business: to bleed you. Bleeding, he assures you, is a surefire method to restore the balance of your humours, those being blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, a medical cocktail equal parts guesswork and wishful thinking. There's very little chance this has anything to do with your stubbed toe, but once a healer has found a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Expect leeches here, too, as well as possibly some barbershop equipment. The line between medical professional and hairstylist is distressingly thin. Let's talk about pain relief. There's no morphine, no Tylenol, no comforting glass of ginger ale after your visit. Instead, you get a curious mixture of root teas, ale, and sometimes, just sheer optimism. If things truly get dire, it's time for the strongest medicine of all, opium, dispensed liberally and with very little sense of dosage. Now, let's say your minor wound takes a turn for the worse and becomes infected, which, in a world without antiseptics, is an everyday occurrence. The only surgical tools are made of repurposed dinner knives and a general sense of urgency. Anesthesia, if you're lucky, takes the form of biting down on a leather strap while the surgeon hums a comforting tune and recites the nearest psalm. There are no antibiotics, just a lot of crossing fingers and hoping your body knows what it's doing. Incredibly, sometimes it does. This is essentially a person who owns a lot of jars filled with dried toads, questionable powders, and enough herbal remedies to stock a medieval kitchen. Apothecary shops are fun to browse, but less fun when you realize every one of those shelves is a roll of the medical dice. Perhaps you're still unconvinced, and think maybe a little magic is exactly what you need. In that case, you'd be prescribed a charm, a prayer, or a brisk walk around a churchyard at midnight, prescriptions equally as effective as anything else on offer. In summary, medicine in the pre-modern world is a heady blend of guesswork, home remedies, and the conviction that if it stinks bad enough or tastes terrible enough, it must be working. The underlying theme? You're on your own, with a little help from the apothecary and a frog in a jar. Maybe you're a blacksmith, maybe you shovel things that shouldn't be mentioned over dinner. Either way, you're urged to keep working through your suspicious fever. HR. That's your mother telling you to stop whining. The phrase "not dying at work" wasn't a joke, it was an aspiration. In most trades, if you made it through the week with all your fingers, toes, and most of your blood inside your body, you were counted among the fortunate. The early office break room was a barrel you slumped over after inhaling too many fumes or fainting from the heat. If management showed up, you pretended you were just resting your eyes, not your vital organs. There were no employee wellness programs, unless you count the advice to walk it off after narrowly escaping death by runaway horse, faulty machinery, or Tom in accounting who didn't know his left from his right. If you did catch fire, the plan was to run faster. As for sick leave, you either worked through your mild tuberculosis or you stopped showing up altogether, at which point your job security became existential. But if you've ever been told to just be more careful while working atop a rickety ladder, you know that workplace safety can often be little more than a polite suggestion. Nowadays, there's a form to fill out every time you so much as look at a splinter, but the real reason for all that paperwork is to let someone, somewhere, claim, "We did everything we could" when you're spectrally haunting the copy machine. The fancier your uniform or the whiter your collar, the subtler the risks. You might not lose a finger, but you could lose years of your life to stress-induced gastritis or ergonomic innovation that's really just a more expensive chair. If you're lucky, this chair comes with lumbar support and the gentle hum of existential dread. Because upping your step count is almost as good as proper medical care. Of course, nothing shines brighter than the annual safety review, an elaborate pantomime orchestrated for the sacred record that the company deeply cares whether you perish before year-end. Workers form a conga line around the fire escape, emergency contacts are refreshed, and everyone receives a free pen. Labor unions fought, sometimes literally, to shift job security from a phrase about graveyards to one about paychecks. Thanks to them, things like functional helmets and actual paid sick leave became expectations instead of luxuries. Today, if you work someplace with mature labor laws, being asked to operate a buzzsaw blindfolded would count as grounds for a landmark lawsuit, not just a notch on your resume. Still, the eternal worker's prayer remains: may my job not kill me before my weekend plans do. Despite progress, there are always cut corners, new hazards, and someone up the chain reviewing your accident report like it's an order from the drive-thru. The dream endures, career advancement that doesn't require dodging falling anvils or mysterious vapors. In the end, job security is more than a paycheck, it's the ongoing miracle of clocking out as alive as you clocked in. So the next time you're told to tough it out, remember, the greatest workplace benefit of all is making it home for dinner, meals unseasoned by industrial dust and tales of near-miss calamity. After a day of labor, you sit at the communal table. Tonight's feast: more bread, more soup, and a spirited debate about whether it was the cats, or maybe the gods, who started this whole mess. The murmurs begin before the ladle touches your bowl. Someone makes a joke about the turnips. Again. You stifle a groan, remembering the golden days when at least an onion or a carrot would occasionally brighten the soupy monotony. Now, Even the mere suggestion that there might be turnip chunks lurking below the surface is enough to elicit a collective sigh from the table. Still, it's tradition to grumble. The daily routine isn't complete without a communal complaint about dinner. But as plates fill and hands reach for hunks of dense bread, conversation spins outward. Issues of the day bubble up. Should we use the precious remaining salt now, or ration it out for the next dark month? Can anyone remember how to light a fire with damp wood and a single stubborn flint? Amidst these practicalities, larger questions sneak in. Who, or what, is really to blame for things being as they are? Was it the cats, with their eerie eyes and silent, calculated steps, slipping in and out of view at crucial moments? Or could it have been the gods, inscrutable and always just out of reach, toying with the world for their own amusement? Every dinner, it seems, has its assigned debater for the evening. Tonight, it's old Baylor, pressing her case for the cat's conspiracies. She points out that whenever grain goes missing, whenever milk curdles, or bread fails to rise, there's always the glint of a tail disappearing through a gap in the door. Opposing her is generous Miklos, who instead sees divine fingerprints all around them. He recounts a vivid dream. Last night, he insists, he saw the gods weaving new troubles from smoky threads. Everyone has their favorite theory, and sometimes people switch sides just for the fun of it, or to escape doing the dishes afterward. It's a kind of ritual, these debates, a way of imposing order, however fleeting, on forces that feel so much larger than any one person. There's comfort in the voices of friends and neighbors, in the reassuring warmth of the soup, however plain, and even in the dull consistency of the bread. The talking keeps the dark at bay and the cold from sinking in too deep. Inevitably, the conversation cycles back to the food. Someone proposes a daring plan, to sneak into the cellar and reorganize the stores, hoping to discover a long-lost root vegetable that isn't a turnip. This suggestion launches a subcommittee of volunteers, plotting out hypothetical heists and scheduling the endeavor for after the elders have dozed off. Laughter rises, echoing off the low beams as schemes grow ever more outrageous. The turnip rebellion always ends with someone claiming they could, if they had a mind, make a meal the gods themselves would envy, given only a single potato. And, through it all, the cats themselves sit along the edge of the room, tails curled neatly, eyes half closed, feigning indifference. But every so often, one will blink slowly in your direction, almost conspiratorially, making you wonder if Baylor isn't right after all. By the end of dinner, bellies are as full as they'll get, and the communal table is ringed with a sort of stubborn hope. Despite the sameness of the meals and the persistence of the turnips, the nightly ritual of talking, debating, and dreaming together weaves a quiet resilience. The bread may grow stale and the soup may thin, but the stories, and the laughter, keep everyone going until the next day's dinner, when, inevitably, someone will ask, "Please, no more turnips?" And everyone will nod in exaggerated agreement, ready to repeat the ritual all over again. The neighbors are whispering again, blaming the Black Death on foreigners, witches, or people with suspiciously clean fingernails. Logic takes a little nap while superstition runs wild. Panic, after all, is the great equalizer. As the death toll rises and sinister clouds hover over the village rooftops, people grasp for an explanation, any explanation, no matter how far-fetched. In the absence of a germ theory, the human mind spins wild stories faster than a town crier can shout the noon news. Did that peddler from a distant country bring disease in his knapsack? Was the eccentric old widow next door quietly cursing the townsfolk after all? In troubled times, suspicion needs little evidence. The hunt for scapegoats becomes a grim viral dance. Outsiders, those with odd accents, unusual clothes, or, heaven forbid, a knowledge of herbs, find themselves on dangerous ground. The persecuted are rarely given a chance to defend themselves. The mere whiff of otherness is proof enough. Traveling merchants, wandering musicians, and anyone who stepped out of line now stand accused in the public imagination. Woe to the stranger seen walking the streets at odd hours, or the woman whose medicinal remedies worked, or failed, a little too well. Witches emerge as a crowd favorite for blame. That hunched figure collecting herbs in the forest? Clearly a sorceress working dark magic to poison the village well. Nighttime howls, unexplained illnesses, or dairy cows refusing to give milk. If there's no straightforward answer, why not turn to witchcraft? Even the church, with its mighty influence, sometimes fans the flames of fear. encouraging confessions in the hope that rooting out evil will halt the plague. Inevitably, the accused are dragged to trial, the evidence as thin as vapor. Foreigners, Jews, gypsies, and travelers from distant lands face even harsher scrutiny. In some places, whole communities are rounded up and banished, or worse, as neighbors turn against each other in the desperate hope that anyone, can be blamed. Secret societies, hidden plots, even the local apothecary become the targets of wild accusations. Punishments are swift and brutal. Rumor carries heavier weight than reason. It was easier to point fingers outward than to accept the awful, chaotic truth of the disease's spread. Ironically, in blaming outsiders, villagers tighten their own ranks. The wider the circle of suspicion grows, the closer everyone draws together, for safety, for identity, for reassurance. Nothing builds a sense of unity like a good, old-fashioned witch hunt. Tragically, this desperate unity comes at a cost. Compassion shrivels, and the innocent suffer. Mobs run wild. Justice becomes a casualty of fear. Of course, the real cause, the invisible bacterium Yersinia pestis lurking in flea-ridden rats, will remain an unimagined horror for centuries. But during the plague's reign, the need to lay blame somewhere, anywhere, is simply irresistible. Human nature abhors uncertainty. Someone has to be responsible, and it's safest if it's not us. So the neighbors keep whispering, casting wary glances over garden walls. The outsider becomes the villain, and rumor, swift and merciless, spreads even faster than the plague itself. If there's a lesson to be drawn from these feverish days, it's this: in the heat of crisis, superstition and scapegoating flourish, leaving reason to pick up the pieces much, much later. Have you considered carrying a posy under your nose to ward off the pestilence? Or maybe tying dead frogs to your feet? Medieval medical advice is unsettling, yet everyone seems keen on trying everything, preferably all at once. Such was the world when the grim shadow of plague crept over the village green. Our very own Dr. Godfrey, for example, is known for his bushy beard, suspiciously herbal aroma, and practically magical ability to look grave and wise at all times. His tools, a large mortar and pestle, an alarming number of bandages, and a consultation fee paid preferably in ale or eggs. If you're feeling a cough tickle your throat, Dr. Godfrey recommends a spoonful of honey, a dash of ground emerald, if you're lucky enough to have any, and a night sleeping with your feet facing east so the evil airs blow away from your resting head. When it comes to boils, he prescribes a hearty hand of leeches and a stern warning to avoid looking at cats, as it's widely believed their gaze will make the situation far worse. Feeling faint? No problem. Simply apply a plaster of bread soaked in vinegar, then hold a warm potato against your chest. Should none be available, stale cheese is a perfectly suitable substitute. Beware, however, of eating too many green apples or heavy potages. These are known to invite melancholy humours, and the town is already rife with enough melancholy. Dr. Godfrey's biggest advice: avoid bad air at all costs. The misfortune of living near the privies or being downwind of the tanner is enough to render anyone unwell, so children are sent with posies under their noses and adults dab sweet waters on their wrists. The crafty, or perhaps the desperate, have taken to fashioning elaborate beak-like masks stuffed with herbs, terrifying to look at, but apparently a shield against invisible dangers. Nor are our four-legged friends forgotten. When the village rooster sneezes, the remedy is garlic tied neatly under his wing. 4 sickly goats, a poultice of crushed nettles and mint is vigorously rubbed on their bellies, much to the goats' distress and the delight of onlookers. In the sick room, hope and superstition are in equal supply. Incantations are softly muttered as rose water is sprinkled liberally under the patient's bed. Prayers to street each is sure their method is best, resulting in the aroma of burning herbs wafting constantly through the lanes. But perhaps the greatest cure, according to the town doctor, is a good night's sleep and gentle humor. Laughter, he says, is the finest defense of all, for it lifts the spirits and chases away the miasmas that linger after twilight. So, he spends his rounds swapping riddles as often as remedies, leaving behind both dubious medicines and lighter hearts. In this patchwork of curious cures, the line between science and superstition blurs, but the intent is clear: facing fear with whatever tools are at hand, be they leeches, lavender, or laughter itself. For in the face of pestilence, everyone becomes a little bit of a doctor, and hope, as ever, is the most powerful prescription of all. Ever wanted to cosplay as a human bird? You might see the town's wealthiest doctor strutting around in a long robe and a beaked mask packed with herbs. Chic isn't the word, but at least you won't recognize who's underneath. But what exactly are these peculiar beak masks, and why did doctors opt for the avian aesthetic? Introduced in the 17th century, plague doctors adopted these odd get-ups as their mandatory uniform. The long beak was not just a fashion statement, it was filled with aromatic herbs, flowers, and even vinegar-soaked sponges. The idea was simple: if the air was dangerous, what doctors then called miasma, why not filter it through a garden before you breathe it? It was medical logic at its finest, or perhaps its weirdest. The rest of the outfit only added to the spectacle. Imagine a witch's cloak crossed with a raincoat, accessorized with a wide-brimmed hat. This head-to-toe ensemble didn't just offer a dramatic entrance, it was meant to shield the physician from head lice, fleas, and, less effectively, the actual plague. Gloves, boots, and a staff completed the look. But so doctors could examine or prod patients from a safe distance, or let's be honest, to keep desperate townsfolk at bay. It wasn't enough to dress up like a crow on a bad feather day, you had to make sure people knew you were serious, preferably at a samba shuffle. When you entered a town square, children would either run for cover or follow in your wake, certain they were witnessing a wizard at work. Meanwhile, adults whispered prayers, clutched talismans, and kept a respectful, or terrified, distance. How effective was this snazzy get-up? Well, let's just say germ theory hadn't arrived yet. The herbs and sweet-smelling items packed into the beak did little to filter out the Yersinia pestis bacterium, but the mask's glass eye holes and body-covering robes may have provided some accidental protection against flea bites. In other words, the plague doctor suit was the medieval equivalent of wearing garlic to keep vampires away, high in visibility, low in scientific merit. Despite the dubious science, beak masks rapidly became an icon, depicted in woodcuts and paintings across Europe. They symbolized both hope and fear, sometimes mocked in theater or even adopted as costumes for masked balls, proof that if humanity can make a joke out of misery, it certainly will. These days, plague doctor beak masks have found new life in pop culture, appearing in everything from video games to Halloween parties. Want to instantly set a creepy, mysterious tone? Arrive at your next costume event with a sweeping black cloak and the infamous beak. You're sure to be the talk, and perhaps the fright, of the gathering. But let's give those early physicians credit where credit is due. Even though they looked, and probably felt, ridiculous, beak masks signified a genuine attempt to protect both doctors and their patients. In their day, the outfit was the closest thing medical science had to PPE. It's a reminder of how, even in times of desperate ignorance, people tried to engineer safety out of whatever scraps of knowledge and fabric they had at hand. So next time you pull out your modern face mask, remember the beak. Bizarre, intimidating, but ultimately a symbol of the age-old human drive to survive, with style points for effort, if not execution. How do you unwind? Someone with a lute tries to cheer you up, a juggler distracts the kids, while a funeral procession goes by in time with the music. It's a vibe. For most medieval peasants, entertainment wasn't a dedicated time slot or a trip to a well-lit multiplex. Instead, it sneaked into daily existence, threading itself through work, worship, and the uneven paving stones of village life. There was little separation between labor and leisure, which means when someone appeared in town with a lute or some balls to juggle, people stopped, if only to remember that life could, occasionally, contain delight, even if that delight came with a side order of existential reminder, like a funeral procession ambling past. Let's start with the juggler. With his colorful clothes, quick hands, and uncanny ability to balance dubious objects, knives, eggs, maybe even small disgruntled animals, the juggler was a walking advertisement for chaos barely held at bay. His audience, farmers, millers, children ankle-deep in mud, all huddled together for a rolling series of gasps and laughter. For these few minutes, attention was pulled away from blisters and debts and the steady march of the worms eating the grain in storage. Everyone knew he was passing through. Soon he'd be off to the next village, trading apples tossed skyward for a cracked loaf of bread. For the kids, the juggler was pure magic. For the adults, well, magic with a faint undercurrent of envy. To juggle was to defy the daily grind, to take dangerous, sharp things and make them dance. Then, we have the bard, The human playlist before streaming was a glimmer in anyone's eye. The bard plucked at a battered lute or strummed a harp, weaving stories that could take people out of their own, sometimes grim, heads for half a song or, if he was good, maybe even a whole chorus. Some bards specialized in the old tales, chivalrous knights, saints, monsters, and fools outwitting fate. Others went for more local flavor, the village scandal, the millhouse mishap, the time the baker's pig swallowed the mayor's hat. In a world without TV, these tales were as close as most folks came to binge-worthy drama. You could laugh, gasp, or weep, in fact, sometimes all three before the day was done. Despite the gentle mood lifting, there was often an edge to the entertainment, a wink at authority, a joke about hunger, a ballad about loss, which brings us, awkwardly, back to that funeral procession. Because weaving through the revelry, some days, was undeniable misery. Death was not a rare guest in the medieval village, it was a perennial attendee, its visits marked by bells and black-draped mourners shuffling over muddy roads. Enter the peculiar sight, children following the jugglers bouncing apples with wide eyes as, just yards away, a coffin is shouldered by stone-faced kin. The bard might switch to a lament, his music a gentle escort for grief. The boundaries between joy and sorrow, celebration and mourning, were thin. Sometimes, the show kept going anyway, because to do anything else would be to admit defeat. This mixture of moods wasn't a contradiction, it was a feature. Entertainment wasn't escapism in the modern sense, because there was nowhere to escape to. Instead, it offered a breather, a communal exhale, a reminder that life, for all its miseries, had rhythms worth dancing to. And maybe, just maybe, if you could keep your eyes on the juggler's hands or lose yourself in a bard's bawdy ballad, you could believe, if only until night fell again, that you too might keep all your troubles in the air, and none would land at your feet. So next time the music starts up, pay attention. You're not just listening for a tune. You're catching the echo of centuries of voices, all making the best of a day filled with laughter, loss, and a little magic as the world spins on. You bond with your family by squabbling over blankets and shooing the slightly too affectionate house dog out of the stew. Cousins keep showing up, nobody's sure where from or who invited them. The atmosphere is a peculiar blend of cozy and chaotic, as familiar faces jostle for couch space while two uncles argue over who makes the best gravy. You knew family gatherings could be a bit unpredictable, but nothing prepared you for the moment when a dog, whose collar tag reads only Meatball, assumed the role of unofficial family therapist. Somehow, Meatball senses when you need a nuzzle or a non-judgmental ear, conveniently provided as you both escape the latest conversation about whose turn it is to host next year. Meanwhile, the cousin population has doubled since dessert. They arrive, bearing ambiguous casseroles and loud greetings, treating your home with the confidence of someone who's been sleeping on your sofa since the late 90s. There's that one cousin whose name you can't seem to recall, but she greets you like a long-lost sibling, arms flung wide, launching into stories that include your supposed participation in legendary family escapades you have absolutely no memory of. Whenever a lull threatens, canine chaos steps in. Meatball, sensing a disturbance in the force, rounds up the youngest children for a lightning-fast lap around the living room, taking out an unfortunate end table along the way. Laughter erupts. Your grandpa claims this is why the family can't have nice things, but you're pretty sure the dent in the wall predates Meatball's heroic run. There's unity in confusion as stories overlap, inside jokes spiral out of control, and, invariably, a baffling family tradition is resurrected. Someone proposes an impromptu game with ever-shifting rules that seem designed mostly to confuse newcomers and amuse the regulars. The dog is a crucial player in all of this, alternate referee, peacekeeper, and silent confidant. When the youngest cousin bursts into tears after being tagged it one too many times, Meatball is there, nudging their hand, ready to be included in the next round. The older relatives, meanwhile, watch from the sidelines with indulgent smiles and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, someone else will volunteer to do the post-dinner dishes. Family time, as it turns out, is a magnificent tangle of familiar routines and new characters, all stitched together with equal parts love, confusion, and canine fur. The cousins you barely know become allies in avoiding kitchen cleanup, and even the uninvited ones somehow find a way into the group photo. You realize that family isn't defined by how well you know each other's birthdays or exact names. It's in the shared space, the laughter, the low-level background chaos that always ends up feeling like home. By the time the last casserole is cleared and the final round of goodbyes drags hilariously on for another half hour, you're already reminiscing about the day. You wonder if anyone else will remember the dog's heroic act, or whether the story will shift and change by the next gathering, with new cousins taking center stage and Meatball picking up yet another honorary family title. Family time isn't peaceful, or orderly, or ever as simple as you imagine, but it's always unforgettable, especially with a loyal dog and a house full of very questionable casseroles. Before bed, you triple-check the door, to keep out evil spirits, light a candle, and pray extremely creative prayers. Mostly, you ask not to wake up with suspicious welts. But let's be honest, locking the door isn't just about practical safety. It's a performative act, a small ceremony you do each night to convince yourself, however briefly, that the world is under your control. You jiggle the knob, slide the bolt, and sometimes press your ear to the cool wood, listening for any hint of movement on the other side. The air seems thicker at night, every pop and creak of the house becomes suspect, a possible harbinger of something sinister. You lock the door not just against human intruders, but against persistent childhood fears that never quite faded. Next comes the candle, your nod to whatever higher power or guardian spirit might be on the night shift. There's a comfort in the warm, flickering light, even though you tell yourself it's simply to mask the shadows drifting across the ceiling. Maybe you once read that candlelight wards off negative energy. Or maybe you just like the way the flame dances whenever you whisper your prayers. Either way, it's a ritual you have no intention of skipping, regardless of what any rational person might say about fire safety. The main event is the prayer itself, elaborate, baroque, and, if anyone were listening in, occasionally comedic. Your prayers, honed by nights of anxious waiting and an overactive imagination, sound more like negotiation tactics than psalms. Outside your bedroom, the rest of the house becomes indifferent, just walls and floors, impersonal and aloof. But inside the candle circle, every object seems charged with meaning. You scan the room, the lumpy shadows beneath your chair, the way your shoes are lined up near the door, the water glass on your nightstand positioned just so. Each is a tiny talisman, a mark of territory against the unknown. You rearrange them, sometimes once, sometimes 3 times, because maybe, possibly, that extra adjustment will be the difference between peaceful sleep and waking up with mysterious bruises. And when you finally slip beneath the covers, eyes glued to the ceiling, there's a moment, brief but tangible, when superstition and reality blur. You're not afraid, exactly, but hyper-aware. Did the candle just flicker more than usual? Was that a step in the hallway, or just the settling of pipes? Every sense is tuned, listening for messages from the dark. You're half tempted to check the door one more time. It's easy to laugh at these rituals in daylight, dismiss them as quaint relics of a more nervous self, but in the hush of evening, when solitude wraps around you and the world outside your door recedes, these routines feel vital, a secret agreement with the universe. Call it superstition, call it spiritual hygiene, call it what you will. Every lock, every whispered plea, every carefully placed glass of water is a reassurance that when morning comes, the world will still be in its right place, and you, mercifully, will wake up itch-free. And so, in the glow of candlelight, behind your triple-check door, you drift into sleep, not because you've banished all fears, but because you've done everything in your power to keep them at bay for one more night. Every few hours, someone rings the chapel bells, summoning you for group worry. Religious processions, incense, and group sobbing are peak nighttime content. The bells toll not for the divine but for that peculiar, institutional sense of looming dread, a call to arms that feels less like a summons to faith and more like an air raid siren. It's a ratcheting up of ritual, a way to synchronize hearts not in hope but in shared alarm. You cannot pretend not to hear it. It rolls through the corridors, erasing whatever sense of private refuge you might have begun to build. The bell is a reminder that here, everyone's terror has a schedule. The procession makes its way through the halls, led by someone clutching a battered crucifix like it's both a weapon and a warning. There's incense, cheap and caustic. It hangs in the air like fog, catching in the throat and laying a sour film on the tongue. The smoke swirls, cloaking faces in a shifting veil, turning every familiar shape into something half-seen, half-feared. At first, you may try to keep your distance, stay detached, even clinical. How quaint, you might think, to see adults clutch at rosaries, muttering in desperate Latin. But after a few days in the pressure cooker, your detachment peels away. Fatigue and hunger sand the edges off your skepticism. You start to notice the way panic travels through a crowd like an electrical current. How, no matter what you believe, fear demands witnesses and converts alike. The group gathers, half prayer meeting, half panic attack. Some are openly sobbing, bodies racked and doubled. Others stare catatonically at the floor, lips moving feverishly in prayers you can't quite catch. There's a rhythm to the madness. The bell, the chants, the periodic spike when someone, overwhelmed, bursts into keening wails. Tears beget tears. Vulnerability is contagious. The rituals take on a fevered intensity as the night grows longer, as sleep deprivation and isolation bite more deeply. The cadence of the bells, once merely annoying, becomes sinister, proof that no matter how the hours crawl, you are still not safe. Anxiety builds in increments, every toll reactivating old guilt, ancient dread, every whisper of incense scraping against the last bit of rational defense. No one is exempt. The irreligious are swept up on the current. Even the most cynical find their resistance sapped. Some begin to see signs everywhere, a creak in the pew, a shadow slanting wrong on the chapel wall, a phrase in the sermon that seems cut and aimed just at them. Group hallucination, maybe. Or just the mind, worn thin, lunging at something, anything, to explain the ambient malaise. Ironically, it's the ritual, the rote, repetitive action, that provides a strange sort of comfort. Spiritual panic, for all its volatility, is at least collective. There's camaraderie in mutual helplessness. You belong to something, even if that something is fear. At the apex of the panicked mass, you're not a lone sufferer but a node in the greater circuit of distress. The incense, the bells, the weeping, they punctuate the sameness of insomnia and uncertainty, lending strange shape to nights that would otherwise dissolve into amorphous dread. When the ringing finally ebbs, and the crowd disperses, you return to your bed or bench, senses rattled, spirit bruised but slightly steadier. In the aftermath, silence is almost blasphemous. Your ears ring with phantom echoes, your heartbeat thrumming to the remembered rhythm of collective terror. You have survived another night, not through faith but through sheer, exhausted participation. In this place, salvation is less about grace and more about endurance. The chapel bells will sound again. And when they do, you'll get up, not out of hope, but out of the strange, shared momentum of spiritual panic that, for now, is the closest thing to purpose you have. Chores must happen, plague or no plague. If you picture medieval cleaning as little more than waving a broom in the general direction of some dirt, think again. Hygiene mattered, especially when failing at it meant an outbreak of something nasty. Households leaned heavily on elbow grease. No whirring vacuum cleaners, no antibacterial wipes, only some grit, determination, and, sometimes, desperate prayers for divine intervention against the relentless onslaught of filth. The essential tools were simple: broom, usually made from birch twigs, buckets, rough brushes, and a remarkable tolerance for both pungent smells and persistent rodents. Floors, typically hard-packed earth or, for the wealthy, flagstones or wooden planks, gathered dust, animal droppings, scraps, and the mysterious debris of daily life. Sweeping was a daily affair for those who could manage it, and periodically, the entire surface might be sprinkled with rushes, aromatic herbs, or sawdust to soak up spills, mask odors, and at least pretend at cleanliness. And then there were the vermin. Were constant companions. Medieval advice manuals recommended a periodic beating of both clothes and bedding. This rather literal approach meant taking everything outside and giving it a good whack to dislodge pests and crumbs. Some households even burned sweet-smelling herbs like lavender or rosemary as a means to fumigate their living space, though others swore by less savory substances, convinced that the strongest stench was the best deterrent. The smell of cleanliness, in other words, was likely a robust blend of sweat, rushes, and singed herbs. Medieval water, especially in towns and cities, was often more hazardous than helpful. Buckets had to be lugged from wells, and the water sprinkled sparingly. For truly horrific messes, think, chamber pot disasters, sand or ashes were sprinkled onto the scene to soak up liquid before a final, heavy-duty sweep. Soap existed, but it was harsh stuff and reserved for big wash days rather than everyday tasks. Lye soap, made from animal fat mixed with ashes, cleaned well but left users' hands regretting the experience. It did, however, kill fleas, a major selling point. If you were lucky enough to have money, great quantities of linen were your best defense. Linen could be laundered and sun-bleached, killing some germs and discouraging the worst pests. For everyone else, extra layers were worn to hide stains and extend the fresh enough period just a little longer. Occasionally, when the build-up became too much, the most practical solution was drastic: a thorough tossing of the entire bedding or mattress and starting from scratch. It's as much spring cleaning as surviving. Religious rituals often mingled with cleanliness. Some people viewed house cleaning as a form of spiritual purification. Holy water sprinkled on doorways, prayers muttered under one's breath, and amulets hung in corners were all considered parts of warding off both disease and evil spirits. As much faith went into cleaning as physical effort, because sometimes only a higher power could tackle the truly sticky patches. So next time you tuck into spring cleaning with your lemon-scented spray, spare a thought for the medieval homemaker, wielding a birch twig, muttering a prayer for protection, wrestling with crawling things that lived in the bedding, and occasionally deciding that throwing everything away and starting over might just be the best answer. Elbow grease, after all, has a long and noble tradition. The dirt, whether in 1349 or today, never really takes a day off. You hear squeaking at night. Everyone's either blaming the rats or adopting cats as pest control, fuzzy emotional support animals. The hero is still that one chicken who refuses to be intimidated. Night falls on the farm and it's the start of the rat games. Tiny, daring rodents sneak between the shadows, plotting their next raid on the grain bin. It's a classic tale, rats versus everyone who tries to sleep while they party. Meanwhile, the humans debate endlessly. What's the best way to win this game of rodent hide-and-seek? Some insist on elaborate traps with peanut butter bait, others swear by naphthalene mothballs, while simultaneously cursing the stench that lingers on last year's potato harvest. But there's another strategy: Team Cat. Enter the cats, glamorous, mysterious, and invariably less motivated than expected. Posters are designed, names like Napoleon and Whiskers the Valiant are bestowed, and new arrivals are paraded through the barn with the expectation that their mere presence will strike fear into the rodent heart. Within days, the cats are spotted, not in hot pursuit, but mostly sleeping in weird sunbeams or curled up in freshly laundered laundry. They offer the occasional trophy, typically a half-eaten field mouse, but by and large, their main contribution is aloofness and photo opportunities for the farm's social media page. Meanwhile, the rats grow bolder. They steal chicken feed, gnaw into storage bins, and when particularly audacious, chew through wiring with a disregard for both farm infrastructure and their own tiny teeth. Discussions about environmentally friendly solutions come and go, ranging from sonic deterrent devices, which seem to entertain the rats and annoy everyone else, to exotic herbal sachets that scatter in a week's time. But, while all eyes are on this fuzzy, furry drama, few notice the quiet determination of the real pest control champion, the lone chicken with a grudge. She isn't flashy, but she's fiercely territorial, patrolling her patch of ground with military discipline. While the other chickens panic at shadows and flee at the slightest hint of squeaking, this chicken, let's call her Beatrice, stands her ground. Pecking furiously, she launches into squawking attacks whenever a rat dares to cross into her domain. Chickens like Beatrice are why some farmers swear that the original pest control force was poultry, not cats. Beatrice's legend grows. She may be feathered, but she's not to be messed with. The barn cats seem to sense the shift in balance of power. They sometimes pause, watching from their lair as Beatrice does their job for them, all feathers and fury, pecking at the scurrying shapes in the dim evening light. The farmers watch this spectacle play out, weighing the merits of adopting another mouser versus letting Beatrice patrol with impunity. Some suggest investing in an army of protective chickens, envisioning a bizarre poultry SWAT team, while others wonder if it would be easier to install better grain bins and live with the company of a few rats. In the end, though, it's Beatrice who tips the scales through sheer audacity and grit. Every farm grapples with pests. Some fight with cats, others with traps, and a few with gadgets and homemade concoctions. Yet, tucked among these strategies is the unpredictable heroism of a brave chicken who simply won't let rodents rule the roost. Maybe the lesson is, sometimes the best pest control is neither the fanciest nor furriest, but the most stubborn and bold enough to try. So, as you drift off to sleep, serenaded by distant squeaks, take a moment for silent admiration. Somewhere outside, A chicken is holding the line. And tonight, at least on this tiny patch of ground, the rats might just think twice. Over dinner, you reminisce. Remember when the worst thing in the village was just stepping in mud? Life was simpler when mud was only a laundry problem. Back then, the rainy season meant grudges against the sky for ruining freshly polished shoes, and laughter echoing around the doorstep as someone tried to scrape thick, stubborn clods from their soles with a stick. Children saw muddy puddles as opportunities, not hazards, a place to stomp, splash, or sculpt a wobbly fort that never survived beyond breakfast. The only thing the grown-ups truly worried about was tracking footprints through the kitchen, and even that was more of an eye roll than a crisis. Adults joked about how you could trace your walk home by the smudges on the floor, but no one lost sleep over it. Laundry lines danced with shirts and trousers sprayed with splotches that told of wild sprints to catch the school bus or shortcuts taken through the cow pasture. Mud was honest, predictable, a fact of life that, somehow, made the end of the day's chores feel earned. You could soak your feet in a bucket, exchange stories about the slipperiest spots, and move on. Compare that to today. The world seems to carry a heavier, stickier load than mere dirt clinging to your shoes. Nowadays, we wade through invisible hazards disguised as progress. Pollution in the air, chemicals in the fields, the unseen risks that shadow every interaction or decision. The old kind of mess, the kind that rinses away with a little soap and effort, has been replaced by troubles that linger in more insidious ways. There's nostalgia in the memory of mud. It marked the seasons and made the village roads treacherous yet familiar. When the biggest village scare was who'd slip first and land with a splash in front of everyone, embarrassment was quickly washed away. No social media posts, no viral videos, just a few good-natured ribbings at the tea shop and a shared sense that everyone was, literally and figuratively, in the same mess. The only stains to worry about were on your clothes, not on your conscience or reputation. The elders recall those times with a wistful sigh. Their stories, repeated like prayers, paint a picture of a world with clear boundaries. Rules were obvious: mud stays outside, shoes by the door, no tracking through the parlor. If only today's problems had such simple solutions: a doormat that could wipe away the worries of the day, a pail of water for the stains left by regret or anxiety. As you share these memories, someone at the table mentions that, even in those muddy days, there was a sense of joy. The struggle was visible and communal. Everyone pitched in to clean up after a downpour. No one was immune, and somehow, being muddy together was almost comforting. A sign that you belonged, that you went out into the world and wrestled with the elements, and maybe lost, but at least not alone. Today, as new types of messes gather, we find ourselves longing for the honesty of mud. It didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. It didn't poison, pollute, or divide. You could scrub it from your hands and feet and get on with things. Even now, when the rain comes and the puddles swell in the lanes, there's a temptation to let go, to forget the complexities for just a moment and remember when the only problem was getting your socks wet. Maybe the world has grown up, or maybe it's just gotten more complicated. But there's something to be said for those old days, muddy and imperfect as they were, a reminder that some of the messes we miss are the ones we could actually clean up. Spot the trendsetters, headscarves pulled tight, layers upon layers, and the latest in foot rags. Everyone's outfit is a compilation of regrets, yet somehow you all make it work. Yet, there's a certain grim pride in looking around and realizing everyone else's personal style is governed by the merciless hand of the weather. That guy in the bright orange beanie? He's less concerned with clashing colors and more focused on not losing an ear to frostbite. Scarves become fiercely hot property. Did you think you'd ever debate mugging a friend for a scarf made out of synthetic Walgreens fleece? Hold onto your scarves like precious heirlooms. They're not just for warmth. They double as pillows, blindfolds, negotiation tokens, or, in a pinch, extra leg insulation when the last tent peg refuses to come out of the ground and you're stuck sitting on the cold earth for hours. If hats could talk, they'd file complaints about their sudden importance. Forgotten in the back of closets all year, they're now pressed into desperate service. Beanies, bucket hats, and, for the truly unfortunate, that one promotional baseball cap someone got free at a marathon 6 years ago. Headwear rules are out the window. Practicality has dethroned aesthetics. No one judges the person sporting a purple trucker cap under a red hoodie anymore. Survival is the only fashion standard. As for socks, well, that's where things get truly experimental. Pioneers of the 2-on-1-foot method trudge forward, displaying mismatched patterns and threadbare holes with the unconcerned confidence of battle-scarred survivors. While luxury brands might tout the merits of cashmere, your group's fashion show spotlights the noble tradition of doubling up cheap, stretched out, possibly damp foot coverings in a desperate attempt to stave off numb toes. Mismatched. Yes. Are those Christmas socks poking out of the hiking boots in April? Absolutely. But it's become its own uniform, little rebels sending a message that you may have lost feeling in your feet, but not your sense of humor. And amidst all the sartorial havoc, a kind of camaraderie forms. The group's look isn't in vogue, but it's instantly recognizable, layers in clashing colors, patterns making no sense, everyone somehow looking both over-prepared and not nearly warm enough. Genuine compliments are rare, but solidarity runs deep. When someone loses a glove and a spare materializes from someone else's bottomless bag, it's met with gratitude akin to a red carpet gift bag. The photos are another delight entirely. Back home, you'll look at group shots and marvel at the sheer audacity of some combinations. Pajamas stuffed under rain pants, bathrobes worn as outerwear, someone sporting 3 hats and the haunted eyes of a person who understands true cold. Years later, you'll swear you've never laughed harder than when someone turned a yoga mat into a makeshift cape, or when hats were swapped mid-hike for good luck, fashion magic at its most creative. So take pride in your unorthodox ensembles. You may not make the cover of a magazine, but your group's fashion statements are memorable monuments to ingenuity and mutual endurance. Mismatched socks and all, you're absolutely nailing it. Villagers form fast friendships and faster suspicions. One day you're splitting bread, the next, you're convinced your neighbor's goat is the Antichrist. Alliances seem to shift with the slightest breeze, or the faintest whiff of garlic from someone else's kitchen. Shared chores or stories by the fire one evening lead to new pacts. Someone helps you carry buckets from the well, and suddenly you're making oaths of lifelong loyalty, perhaps sealed with a handshake or a jug of homemade plum liquor. Yet, these sworn allegiances rarely last the week. The next day, your newest confidant may flatly refuse to lend you an egg, citing some obscure family feud last resurrected by a misremembered proverb. Arguments blossom wherever villagers gather, by the bakery, outside the blacksmith's, or near the communal water pump. These quarrels rarely start over the big things like property lines or dowries. They erupt over smaller slights, a squash pilfered from the communal patch, or an unkind word said about someone's preserves. A single, innocuous comment, "Your turnips seem a bit limp this year," could ignite a vendetta lasting 3 harvests. Suspicion, however, is the town's favored spice. If a hen stops laying or a loaf doesn't rise, villagers immediately cast narrowed eyes at the nearest scapegoat. The same fellow cheering your victory at yesterday's dice game will tomorrow swear he saw you consorting with the witch at the edge of the woods. This is less paranoia than pastime, a necessary ingredient in the day's entertainment, as crucial as salt for preserving meat. Their games, like the adults' relationships, are mock versions of real disputes. Even animals can't escape the drama. Dogs are branded as spies, and cats as mysterious meddlers, depending on which side of a petty squabble their owners fall. And yet, for all the dramatic shifting of allegiances, deep down, the villagers know they're bound together by necessity. When the river floods, the fields demand reaping, or a traveling merchant's prices need haggling, the same feuding pairs suddenly unite with frightening efficiency. There's an unspoken rule: no matter the latest quarrel, no outsider must ever suspect that unity is lacking here. Feuds are, after all, a family matter. These temporary truces, however, don't last. The moment the crisis passes, suspicions reawaken. Old arguments are unearthed, given new color, and perhaps embroidered with some extra scandal for flair. At festivals, where wine flows and memories loosen, villagers trade barbed jokes, each one a gentle reminder of last winter's misunderstanding or an autumn that got a little too competitive at the apple bobbing contest. It can seem exhausting to an outsider, all this turning of friends into suspects and back again. But for villagers, this restless cycle is life, a dance of distrust and camaraderie performed on a stage just wide enough for a dozen families. It's less about who's right or wrong, and more about keeping the wheels of gossip turning and the bonds of community, however frayed, intact. Sometimes, years later, someone may try to recall the original offense behind a grudge. No one remembers. But they'll agree, with a knowing nod, that it was probably very important at the time. Meanwhile, the bread is shared again, and the goat, for today, remains just a goat. Neighborhood crisis? Time to blame the planetary alignment. Stars are blamed for everything from boils to why the soup tastes weird tonight. It's a time-honored tradition. Someone trips on the sidewalk, not because it's uneven and has needed repair since the Nixon administration, but because Mercury is in retrograde. Your neighbor's kids are running wild, skidding through the petunias and chasing a feral cat. Is it lack of discipline or too much sugar? Of course not. Venus is crossing paths with Mars, and so chaos simply must reign. The weather's bad? Well, Jupiter is angry again, says Mrs. D'Angelo, clutching her binoculars and scrolling through her horoscope app. No amount of scientific explanation about atmospheric pressure, jet streams, or climate change can compete with the majesty of Saturn's mighty mood swings. Rain during the block party? It wasn't the ill-timed scheduling or poor planning. Clearly Neptune demanded a sacrifice, and this year it decided on Mrs. Patel's potato salad. It's not just the big stuff, either. Lost your car keys for the third time this week? Retrograde. Left your phone in the fridge? Again? Uranus is acting up. The local gossip mill thrives on cosmic scapegoating. If it's a minor inconvenience, it's because Pluto is hurling metaphysical snowballs at your zodiac sign. If something actually good happens, that's when folks look confused, because frankly, nobody remembers what alignment is supposed to make something go right. As if your secondary zodiac identity has special clearance to grant you a lucky break. And let's talk about relationship drama, the kind that keeps everyone glued to their windows. When arguments escalate, it's not about poor communication or the fact that someone accidentally mowed over the hydrangeas. No, this relational apocalypse must be blamed on Mars squaring Venus, or maybe the moon is just in a snarky phase tonight. Within minutes, people take sides not based on facts, but on the warring factions of star signs. Team Libra versus Team Cancer, with the solitary Taurus just wanting a snack. Local businesses are in on it, too. The bakery? It's essentially a celestial customer service hotline. Press 1 for Mercury, press 2 for Uranus, or just wait on the line until you reach the next excuse. The school board cites cosmic energy as the culprit for absenteeism during finals week, which is odd considering cosmic energy is rarely invoked when test scores are up. Even the handyman starts suggesting that he'll schedule repairs just as soon as the moon enters Capricorn, leaving you with a leaky faucet until further astrological notice. But perhaps the real magic of blaming astrology is its ability to bring people together. No matter your differences, politics, music taste, opinions on mayonnaise, you can all unite under the grand, cosmic scapegoat. At least for a few moments, everyone's troubles share a common, starry source. So next time disaster strikes, before examining the very real problem, a squirrel in the transformer, you forgot to pay the electric bill, the dog ate the remote, just gaze upwards. If in doubt, blame astrology. After all, it's much more fun than facing the truth. And besides, the stars can't sue for slander. Night falls. You listen to distant howls, creaking wood, and your own thoughts. All you can do is wait for morning and hope yesterday's cure wasn't actually poison. The dark presses at the windows and gathers in the corners, thick with old mysteries and new fears. Every shadow seems to shift. You listen harder, trying to separate real threat from imagination. Your breath is slow, shallow, as if the night itself will hear you if you gulp too loudly. Somewhere in the house, beams contract and moan, a low, aching complaint that echoes your own body. Your stomach twists. Is that from nerves, or a new symptom? The fire burned low hours ago. You didn't dare feed it much. The glow might draw unwanted eyes. Instead, you huddle in a patchwork of blankets, clutching the mug of water you set aside at dusk. Cold now, it tastes metallic. Your tongue lingers, testing for the faintest change. Bitter, sour, numb. Are you imagining things? You replay the events of the day, the frantic search for medicine, the shaky hands of the apothecary as he measured powders, muttered warnings. Did he mix correctly? Did you? Was the faded label on the jar right? Doubt crawls down your spine. Maybe you should have waited, ask someone else for help. But help is rare here, rationed and suspect. Each person guards their knowledge, and you wonder if today's favor was a kindness or a ploy. Another howl, closer this time. Canines or something else. You used to love dogs. Now, any animal cry at night feels like a threat. You picture yellow eyes in the underbrush, watching, patient. Your hand drifts to the knife under your pillow, a flimsy comfort at best. Time thickens. The clock on the wall gave up hours ago. You measure hours by the coal's glow and the ache in your knees. Sleep tempts you, heavy and dangerous. You fight it, knowing what nightmares come when your guard is down. Infected wounds, masked faces, loved ones who suddenly look wrong. You blink hard, shake your head, focus on the room. Fingers run over familiar scars and the rough wool of your blanket, grounding yourself in the present. Outside, something scuffles by the door. A rat. Or worse. You hold your breath. Nothing happens. Eventually, your shoulders loosen, and you exhale, slow, deliberate. You turn over memories in the silence, try to find hope. There was a time when night meant rest, not sentry duty. You recall your mother's whispered lullabies, a window cracked to let in sweet air, the certainty that morning always followed night. You hum a fragment under your breath, too soft for anyone but you to hear. Hope is stubborn. It persists, even when the world narrows to fever dreams and fear. You recite a list of tomorrow's possible mercies. Maybe the bruises will fade. Maybe the shakes will pass. Maybe the cure will work. Maybe the howling will stop, the light will return, and your heart will beat steady again. You listen for dawn, for the first distant call of birds, the tiny shift in air that signals the world hasn't ended yet. Your eyelids sag, but you force them open. Just a little longer. The worst things always happen when you let your guard down, you've learned. But without hope, what's left? The sky outside is black, opaque, and endless. Still, you watch. You listen. You hope. It is all you can do, and tonight, it is enough. You gather close, laugh at absurdity, and promise yourself tomorrow will be better. Despite everything, there's stubborn hope and plenty of jokes left about how truly wild this year has been. Hope is a strange thing, stronger than garlic necklaces and just as essential in the plague-ridden dormitories of yesterday and today. Through every wave of chaos, from pandemics to panic-buying toilet paper, people have defied despair with laughter. They sat around battered tables, swapping horror stories and jokes that grew taller on each retelling, somehow transforming trauma into the raw material for next year's stand-up routine. Because humor is more than a shield, it's a secret weapon, a survival skill honed alongside bread baking and basic hygiene. In the worst times, the best jokes surface, burrowing into our collective memory like particularly resilient bacteria. It's easier to face a new dawn when you remember you're not the first to feel overwhelmed by circumstances. Plagues have come and gone, famines, wars, and disasters have weaved themselves into the background static of human history. Yet despite heartbreak, and no shortage of historical absurdities, each generation found something to laugh about. Maybe it was the fact that everyone looked equally ridiculous with half-shaved heads, lice, of course. Maybe it was the universal mystery of why, no matter the century, someone was always convinced that onions could cure anything. Are you suffering? Loved one feeling ill? Centuries later, the specifics may change, but that impulse to mock the madness remains. You stub your toe and groan, but at least you have shoes, and you're not wading through medieval filth and praying the rats haven't noticed you yet. You flinch at the mountain of laundry in your hamper, but breathe easy knowing hot water is a faucet away. Our ancestors would have traded their last pewter spoon for that luxury. Learning to survive isn't just about enduring, it's about finding those fragments of hilarity in the mess. Every generation has its private catastrophes, its favorite scapegoats, and its silver linings. History shows us, repeatedly and sometimes in excruciating detail, that people adapt, often with a sense of humor that's as grim as it is bright. The stories we pass down aren't just about suffering. They're about survival, the ridiculousness of the human condition, and the wild, stubborn resilience that bubbles up when things get truly weird. We mock our old fears, thank our stars for small mercies, and invent new rituals for staving off doom. Sometimes, You survive simply because you refuse to stop laughing. In the end, hope and humor are the things we cling to when answers are in short supply. They thread through our toughest nights and hangover mornings, binding us to each other across decades and disasters. So tonight, as you drift off in your clean sheets and the only medieval horror is the memory of your dorm roommate's laundry habits, take a moment to thank your immune system, the wonders of modern plumbing, and the brave idiots who came before you and somehow didn't all perish from eating room temperature mayonnaise. Remember, history is full of suffering, struggle, and a truly baffling lack of basic hygiene. But people survived, laughed, blamed cats, and invented new ways to make it to tomorrow, sometimes literally by the skin of their teeth. Our ancestors, bless their itchy, plague-addled hearts, trudged through misery with humor, stubbornness, and a little hope. So if they could manage all that, and invent cat memes centuries before the internet, maybe we can manage to sleep through one more night without doom scrolling. Turn off those screens, whisper a quiet thank you to the people who figured out germs, and let yourself float away on a bed of relative comfort. You survived the Black Death tonight, at least in your imagination. So tonight, as you drift off in your clean sheets and the only medieval horror is the memory of your dorm roommate's laundry habits, take a moment to thank your immune system, the wonders of modern plumbing, and the brave idiots who came before you and somehow didn't all perish from eating room temperature mayonnaise. Remember, history is full of suffering, struggle, and a truly baffling lack of basic hygiene. But people survived, laughed, blamed cats, and invented new ways to make it to tomorrow, sometimes literally by the skin of their teeth. Our ancestors, bless their itchy, plague-addled hearts, trudged through misery with humor, stubbornness, and a little hope. So if they could manage all that, and invent cat memes centuries before the internet, maybe we can manage to sleep through one more night without doom scrolling. Turn off those screens, whisper a quiet thank you to the people who figured out germs, and let yourself float away on a bed of relative comfort. You survived the Black Death tonight, at least in your imagination. Sleep well, and dream of a world where garlic necklaces are strictly optional.